For months, this entire Bricks and Minifigs story has revolved around one man, Ammon McNay. His name is in every article, his face is in every thumbnail, every decision, every lawsuit, every PR failure has been attributed to him as the CEO. He has absorbed all of it. But what if Ammon McNay isn't actually the one in charge? What if there is someone above him? Someone who has been completely silent, completely out of the spotlight, and completely out of any interview for nearly a decade? Who may actually hold final authority over this company? New reporting from YouTube channels BJC and EBN has surfaced a name that almost nobody in this story has mentioned until now. That name is Reed Brimhall. Here is what is publicly documented. Reed Brimhall has been listed as the Chief Financial Officer of Bricks and Minifigs franchising since June 2016. That is not a rumor. It is written directly into Bricks and Minifigs' own 2026 franchise disclosure document, the same document that has been at the center of this story for months. He has been CFO of this company for nearly a decade, and until this week, virtually nobody covering this story had ever said his name. But it gets more layered than that. Reed Brimhall also personally owns and operates the Boise, Idaho Bricks and Minifigs location, described by people who visited it as a flagship-level store, larger and more impressive than a typical franchise location. The CFO of the company owns his own store inside the franchise network he helps run, and his son, Adam Brimhall, works at Bricks and Minifigs Corporate, and wrote one of the witness statements to police that has been used against Reckless Ben in the ongoing legal case. The Brimhall family has been quietly involved at every level of this company and this controversy for nearly a decade. We just didn't know their name until now. Now here is where the FDD gets strange. The document states that Reed Brimhall has been CFO of, and I'm quoting directly, the franchisor and the franchisor's parent. The franchisor is Bricks and Minifigs Franchising Incorporated. The franchisor's parent is something above it, an entity that owns or controls the company. But then, in a different section of that exact same document, Bricks and Minifigs states they have, again quoting directly, no parents or predecessors required to be disclosed. So which is it? Is there a parent company or not? The document references one in one place and denies it in another. That is not a small inconsistency. That is the kind of contradiction that raises a very serious question about what this company is actually structured around and who is actually at the top. But let's set the FDD aside for a moment, because Reed Brimhall's ownership role is not something that only appeared in a legal document. Years before this scandal, before Reckless Ben, before any of this, Reed Brimhall did an interview with a profile-style online publication. And in that piece, he described opening the Boise store to give his son opportunity and purpose. A nice story. But buried in that same article is a direct description of Reed as, quote, part owner and CFO of Bricks and Minifigs franchising. He said it himself, years ago, in public. Part owner. Now, part owner doesn't automatically mean majority owner. It doesn't tell us how much of the company he controls or what his voting authority looks like. But it does confirm that an ownership stake beyond the CFO title has been publicly acknowledged for years. This isn't a recent leak. This is something Reed Brimhall allowed to be published about himself long before anyone was paying attention. The YouTube channel EBN took this further. They spoke with a former Bricks and Minifigs manager named Tava, on the record, using her real name, who worked directly for Reed Brimhall. And she told EBN something that changes the entire frame of this story. In her own words, I don't have proof that Reed owns 60%, but he told me he owns more than 60%. He told me himself. A named former employee saying that the CFO personally told her he owns the majority of the company. That is a significant claim from a credible source. And EBN also had a second source, someone with close ties to Bricks and Minifigs Corporate, who corroborated the same claim, saying that veteran franchise owners have heard the same thing internally. So you have a public article calling him part owner, a named former direct report saying he claimed majority ownership to her personally, a second source from inside the company corroborating it, and a franchise disclosure document that references a parent company in one section and denies it exists in another. EBN did the responsible thing before publishing. They contacted Reed Brimhall directly. Reed responded. He asked them to send specific questions. They did. Direct questions about his ownership percentage, whether he has voting control, and what the parent entity referenced in the FDD actually is. Reed replied, "Thanks for sending this. Let me study it a bit, and I'll get back to you tomorrow." He never answered. Bricks and Minifigs Corporate was also sent a detailed media request on July 9th, with a response deadline of July 13th. Corporate never responded either. But here is the detail that makes that silence feel intentional rather than accidental. After EBN published their initial coverage, they say they were provided screenshots appearing to come from an internal Bricks and Minifigs Slack discussion, the internal communication system that connects franchise owners up to corporate. EBN is careful to note they cannot independently verify these screenshots, but the messages appear to show EBN's media request being discussed internally. And one message reportedly indicates that questions sent to or about corporate staff were, quote, not expected to receive answers. Not unable to answer, not unavailable, not expected to receive answers. The silence was the plan. Now think about what this means in the context of everything else. The July 10th blog post, the one that announced 7 improvements and framed everything around rebuilding trust, was attributed to Bricks and Minifigs Corporate, to Ammon McNee's leadership. It was built around the message that the company wants to earn back the confidence of its franchise owners and the public. But trust requires knowing who actually holds power. If Ammon McNee is not the majority owner, if someone else holds 60% or more of this company and has final authority over litigation strategy, board decisions, and franchise policy, then every promise in that blog post might mean something very different. Because the person who made those promises may not be the person who has the final say. And if current franchise owners, the ones who signed that no-confidence petition demanding leadership change, don't know who Reed Brimhall is, then they may be directing their petition at the wrong person entirely. Here is what we know and what we do not know. We do not know for certain that Reed Brimhall owns 60% or more of Bricks and Minifigs franchising. We do not know if he holds those shares directly or through another entity. We do not know what the parent entity referenced in the FDD actually is, or who controls it. We do not know who has final voting authority over major company decisions. What we do know: a named former employee says Reed told her personally he owns the majority. A public magazine profile from years before this scandal describes him as part owner. The franchise disclosure document references a parent company in one section and denies it exists in another. And when asked directly, by a journalist, with specific questions, after he personally requested them, Reed Brimhall went silent, so did corporate. Ammon McNee has been the face of everything. Every press appearance, every controversy, every bit of public scrutiny. He has been treated as the person responsible. And maybe he is responsible. But responsible and in charge are not the same thing. Bricks and Minifigs says trust needs to be rebuilt, but you cannot rebuild trust with a company when the public doesn't even know who's actually running it. When the franchise disclosure document contradicts itself about whether a parent company exists. When the man who may hold majority ownership was asked direct questions, promised to answer, and then disappeared. The name is Reed Brimhall. He has been CFO since 2016. He may own the majority. His son is involved in the legal case against Reckless Ben, and he has said absolutely nothing. That is not a coincidence. That is a choice.